Mallory, 28. Working at a gas station never promised excitement, but it always guaranteed stories. Some funny, some gross, some downright confusing. I never thought I would witness something that would feel like a strange, dark metaphor for the state of the country, but that is exactly what happened on a Wednesday I will never forget. The day gasoline prices skyrocketed and someone decided to turn their car into a protest fireball. I have worked the evening shift at a gas station just outside of Knoxville, Tennessee, for about 4 years now. The station is wedged between a Waffle House and a small auto parts store, across from a high school where the students loiter after class and joke about our snack prices. My job is simple: handle the register, restock the energy drinks, reset the pumps when they glitch, and occasionally argue with people about coupons that expired in 2017. It is not glamorous, but it pays rent and gives me time to listen to my podcasts between rushes. Price changes happen all the time. Every month or so, corporate sends down a memo through our crusty little computer, and I push a few buttons to update the pumps. Usually, it is something like a 5-cent increase per gallon. People grumble, they fill their tanks anyway, and life goes on. But that morning, I walked in and saw something I had never seen before. The email from corporate was stamped urgent in red, and the price change was not 5 cents. It was 87 cents. That meant the average gallon of regular went from $3.12 to $3.99 in one update. Diesel jumped even more. I double-checked the numbers, thinking it was a mistake. I even called my manager, who told me it was happening all over the region, and to just go ahead with it. I did. The fallout was immediate. By 9 a.m., local Facebook groups were posting screenshots of the new prices with captions in all caps. The phone at our counter started ringing off the hook. People came in just to yell, not to buy. One guy screamed at me about oil cartels for 10 minutes and left without even using the bathroom. Business slowed down by lunchtime. It felt like people were boycotting or just too angry to deal with it. I was not surprised when things got weird. I just did not expect how weird. It was around 2:15 p.m. when the man pulled in. He was driving a battered silver Honda Civic, the kind with mismatched doors and the front bumper held on with zip ties. He rolled into pump number 6 and walked in with a casual, tired look, the kind of face that tells you the person has worked a long shift and just wants to go home. He asked to fill the tank. I said sure, told him the price per gallon, and reached for the register. That was the moment his face changed. He blinked, then tilted his head, then narrowed his eyes. "What price?" he asked, with a weird flatness to his voice, like he had not heard me right. I repeated it, explaining that prices had jumped that morning. He stared at me like I had personally done this to him. I offered to cancel the transaction, but he just shook his head and said, no, it was fine. He would pump it himself. He did not raise his voice. He did not argue. He did not curse or accuse me of stealing from hardworking Americans. He just said he would do it himself, took his receipt, walked out, and started filling his car. I went back to wiping down the counter, not thinking too much about it. 3 minutes later, I smelled smoke. At first, I thought someone had lit a cigarette at the pump, which happens more often than it should. But then I saw the smoke was too thick, black, oily. It poured past the windows, like something out of a horror movie. The moment I registered the color, my hand slammed the emergency shutoff under the counter, and the automatic alarm tripped. The intercom screeched, the pre-recorded evacuation message. I grabbed the fire extinguisher and ran for the door with the two other employees on shift. Outside, chaos had already bloomed. Flames licked up from the back of the Civic, not from the engine or exhaust, but from the trunk and rear tires. The fire had started underneath and was spreading fast. The air shimmered with heat and smelled like rubber and gasoline. Customers screamed. A woman ran with her toddler across the street to the Waffle House parking lot. My coworker, Chris, was shouting something into his phone as he backed away from the edge of the awning. And then I saw him, the man, standing across from the pumps, near the curb, not 20 feet from the fire. He was smoking a cigarette. He was just standing there, watching his own car burn to nothing, as calm as someone watching pigeons in a park. I froze. I could not move, could not even raise my voice. He had poured gasoline on his own car. I knew it. I did not know how I had missed it, how he had done it so subtly, but it was clear. No way this was an accident. I walked toward him step by step, half hoping someone would stop me. I had to know why. I had to understand. When I was close enough, I asked what he had done. He turned to me, still holding the cigarette between his fingers, his face unreadable, and said with chilling indifference that he hated this country and that these cars were all trash. Then he turned back to the fire. I could not speak. I just stood there, watching the reflection of orange flames in his sunglasses, stunned by the level of hopelessness, anger, and detachment it must take to torch your own car at a gas station and walk away with a blank stare. I had seen angry customers. I had seen petty vandalism. But this was something else. It was not even a protest. It was surrender. The fire department showed up within 5 minutes, but it felt like an hour. They got it under control fast, thankfully, and no one was injured, which still shocks me. The car was gone, melted into a twisted shell of blackened steel and bubbling plastic. The man was arrested quietly. He did not resist, did not speak, did not even finish his cigarette. The investigation that followed confirmed what I suspected. He had doused his car with gasoline before pretending to fill it. He lit it on fire as soon as we stopped paying attention. There was no manifesto, no political message, no demands, just a note in his glove box that said he was tired of everything and nothing worked anymore. We closed for the rest of the day. The district manager came down and tried to spin it into a teachable moment about pump safety and customer observation. But no amount of corporate policy memos can prepare you for the moment when someone decides their only power left is to burn their own property in silence. I still work at the same station. Every time the prices change, I remember his face. I remember the sound the fire made. I remember the way he said it, like it was not even worth getting mad anymore. Some people rant. Some people protest. Some people throw bricks or post angry rants online. But some people, like that man, just watch it all burn. Update 1. When the smoke cleared and the fire trucks had finally pulled back, I remember standing in the middle of the parking lot with my arms still trembling, my palms reeking of extinguisher powder and fear. The remains of the Civic were still smoldering, a gutted carcass on what used to be Pump 6. The fire had devoured everything: pumps, signage, the awning above them, and the front of the station itself. The walls were blackened husks. The roof looked like it had folded inward, and the windows had all burst out from the heat. Nothing remained intact. It was only then that I noticed something else. The security system was gone too. Our cameras had been mounted under the awning and at the corners of the building. There were no backups, no cloud upload, no external hard drive hidden in a back room. The system was as old as the building, and corporate had always said a replacement was in the budget for next quarter. Now there was nothing. The monitors had melted. The cables were ash. Every single frame of footage from that day was gone. I did not realize the severity of that loss until the police arrived. The first officer on scene had been calm, asking questions with a practiced tone while keeping his distance from the still warm vehicle shell. But once more units showed up. Everything changed. They started cordoning off the area with yellow tape, pulling us aside one by one, not to comfort us, but to separate us. At first, I thought they just wanted to gather statements efficiently, but then they told us we could not leave. They took our phones, then our bags. I looked at Chris, and he looked at our other coworker, Teresa, and for a moment, we all silently wondered the same thing. Were we under suspicion? They took us to the precinct downtown, not in handcuffs, but not gently either. We were all loaded into the back of a transport van like we were suspects in some backwoods heist. My clothes still smelled like scorched rubber and cheap, synthetic uniform fabric. I kept trying to hold onto the image of what I saw, the man, the fire, the cigarette, the words he said, but my memory felt like it was slipping through my fingers, like it was too surreal to explain in a way anyone would believe. At the station, the questioning began. Each of us was put into a separate room. It was not aggressive, but it was clear that they were not treating us as mere witnesses. The officer asked how long I had worked there, if I had any issues with the gas station or my employer, if I knew the man, if I had ever spoken to him before. I kept repeating that I did not, that he was a complete stranger, that he had calmly asked to fill his tank, and that he lit his own car on fire. The officer stared at me, unreadable, then jotted something into his notebook and left me alone for an hour. When they finally brought us back into the same room together, the mood had changed. A different officer, higher rank by the look of his uniform, came in with a thin folder in his hand and dropped it onto the metal table like it weighed more than it did. He told us they had spoken with the man. He said his name was Gary Ralston, 49, former mechanic, divorced, no priors, no drugs in his system, no obvious mental health flags. But then the officer said something that made my stomach twist into a knot so tight I thought I would throw up. Gary was saying we had set the fire. He claimed that we were angry about the price hike, that we wanted to make a statement, that we chose him at random as part of some revenge plot against the oil companies. He said we poured the gasoline on his car and forced him to stand there while we watched it burn. He said we told him not to speak and walked away as it happened. I was stunned. For a long moment, I thought it was a misunderstanding, some weird psychological deflection. But then the officer explained that since the surveillance system was destroyed, and because there was no one else on site at the time of the fire, no third-party witnesses, no other customers parked at the pumps, we could not be ruled out. Gary had already called a lawyer, and that lawyer was already spinning the narrative that we had framed a man in mental distress. It was like watching a lie evolve in real time, one that somehow had more power than our truth. I kept thinking, there is no way anyone would believe this. But then I remembered how strange his calmness had been, how disconnected he looked when the flames danced off his sunglasses. He had not been erratic or panicked. He had stood still, perfectly collected. And now it made sense. He had planned this. He knew there were no cameras. He chose the time and place. And worst of all, he made us the perfect suspects. The gas station, to corporate, was already considered a total loss. Our district manager had shown up at the precinct, not to defend us, but to assess the liability. We overheard him talking to someone on the phone, whispering about insurance, about fire codes, about whether or not our training logs had been up to date. I realized then that we were on our own. No one was coming to clear our names. We were just 3 employees who happened to be standing near the wrong man at the worst possible moment. The officers did not arrest us, but they made it clear we were part of an open investigation. We had to stay in the city. We could not return to the gas station site. We were told not to speak to each other about the details of the case. Chris looked pale and furious. Teresa kept blinking like she was trying not to cry. I sat in the corner of that fluorescent-lit room and stared at the coffee machine that no one was using, wondering how someone like Gary could decide to set fire to his car and then lie so smoothly that we became the villains. The worst part? He looked so average, so normal. A man in a frayed jacket and scuffed boots, someone who would not stand out in a crowd. But he had turned our lives upside down in under 5 minutes. He had burned down our workplace and walked away with a story polished enough to cast doubt on 3 innocent people. As we were finally escorted out that evening and told we would be contacted soon for follow-up, I remember stepping out into the cold wind and hearing a reporter across the street ask if the station had been targeted by disgruntled employees. That was the moment I knew we were in real trouble, not just because of what he did, but because of what he made everyone believe. We were just 3 coworkers, 3 people who wanted to finish our shift and go home. And now we were suspects in someone else's narrative, watching our names twist in the smoke of a fire we never lit. Update 2. I always thought if I ever ended up on television, it would be for something small and forgettable. A background blur in a parade shot or a 5-second interview during a local fair. Never once did I imagine it would happen like this, and never in my darkest thoughts did I expect to see my own face plastered on a national news segment under the headline, "Gas Station, Fire Mystery, Employee Involvement, Suspected." It did not feel real. None of it did, but it was. And by the time I realized how big it had become, there was no taking any of it back. It started 2 days after the fire. I was at home, lying on my couch with the curtains closed and the lights off. I had not gone back to work because there was no workplace left to go to. Our manager had sent out a group message saying that corporate was launching an internal investigation and that we were to consider ourselves on unpaid leave until further notice. I spent the hours in a haze of scrolling news feeds, half in shock, half in numb disbelief. That was when I saw the headline on my phone. Tennessee gas station fire. Was it protest or arson? My breath caught in my throat. The article was filled with speculation. It mentioned the spike in fuel prices and described the incident as bizarre and possibly deliberate. It named our location, linked it to the regional unrest over oil prices, and even included a photo taken from across the street, grainy but unmistakably showing me, Chris, and Teresa standing near the wreckage. The captions underneath were vague, but one phrase stood out like it had been burned into my skin. Investigators are questioning whether an employee may have played a role. From there, it spread like wildfire. Local news stations picked it up, eager to frame it as part of a growing narrative of outrage over gas prices. National channels ran the story in their morning segments. Talk show panels debated it while sipping coffee and chuckling through words they clearly did not understand. TikTok and Instagram exploded with conspiracy theories, jokes, edits of the burning car set to dramatic music, and hot takes from influencers who had never worked a service job a day in their lives. And in the middle of it all was me. They dug into our identities with terrifying speed. It took one blogger to find a tagged photo of me from my cousin's wedding 2 years ago, and suddenly, my full name was trending on Reddit. People picked apart my Facebook profile. Strangers screenshot my old posts about work, twisting my words into what they wanted to see. One photo I had taken during a night shift, joking about being cold and surrounded by overpriced fuel, was reposted with captions like, "Looks like she finally snapped." Then the calls started. First, it was my aunt from Kentucky. She asked if I was okay and if what they were saying on TV was true. I tried to keep calm to explain, but the silence on the other end told me she did not fully believe me. Then my older brother called from Michigan. He was furious, not at me, but at the idea that our family name was being dragged through the mud on national television. He kept asking what I had told the police, whether I had a lawyer, whether I was going to sue for defamation. I could barely speak. My throat felt raw from stress. I just kept repeating that I had not done anything. But the worst part came that night, when my mother called. She lives in Arkansas and does not keep up with the news much, but even she had seen it. Her voice cracked when she asked if I was the girl in the video, and I said yes. The pause before she said anything else was longer than I could bear. That pause hit harder than any headline, any accusation, any whisper from a stranger online. By the end of the week, the story had fully morphed into a symbol of something bigger. News anchors began using our incident as an example of the supposed breaking point of the working class. They debated whether employees at minimum wage jobs were finally lashing out at the companies exploiting them. They asked if the gasoline price surge was the new frontier of protest. They used us to fuel their narrative, tossing our names around like we were characters in a script they had written without ever talking to us. I was no longer Mallory, a woman who worked the register at a gas station outside Knoxville. I was the gas station girl. In every news package, they used the same photograph. Me in my uniform, standing with my hands up, eyes wide, from the shock of the fire behind me. That frame was everywhere. It was used in thumbnails, posted in memes, printed in the corner of op-eds, written by people who had never once seen me in person. And each time I saw it, I felt less real. I was becoming a symbol, not a person. And no one seemed to care about what was true. People began recognizing me. I could not walk through the grocery store without someone whispering behind me. I deleted my social media accounts, but screenshots kept circulating. I started getting mail at my apartment, some supportive, some hateful, all from strangers who thought they had the right to comment on my life. I received letters telling me to confess, letters telling me to sue the police, letters asking if I would sell my story to as a podcast. It was a nightmare, wearing a mask of fame I never asked for. Chris and Teresa were going through the same thing. We could not even talk about it with each other. Our messages were being monitored as part of the investigation. But I saw Teresa crying in the background of a news clip where they showed our old gas station, and I knew she was drowning in the same sea I was. Chris was interviewed on a local radio station, his voice shaking while he defended us, only to be edited down to a few sound bites that made him sound defensive and suspicious. The story refused to die. Each time a news outlet tried to move on, another twist would bring it back. Gary's lawyer announced he would be seeking damages for psychological trauma, claiming we had orchestrated a setup to frame him as an unstable man. Fuel prices surged again 2 weeks later, and our story resurfaced with new urgency, as if we were the poster children of some fictional revolution. I never thought my life would unravel because of something I did not do. I never thought I would become infamous because I showed up to work one morning and pressed a button to update prices on a pump. But now, I was one of the faces of the chaos. My name was etched into a moment America could not stop talking about. I had become a symbol of something I never wanted to represent. And now, when people looked at me, they did not see Mallory. They saw the gas station girl. They saw fire and smoke and a headline. They saw a crisis. They saw a meme. And the worst part was, no one was even asking if I was okay. Update 3. It took 3 more exhausting weeks, but the truth finally clawed its way to the surface. The police had been digging through witness statements, insurance records, and forensics reports since the fire, and the turning point came when technicians reconstructed partial audio from a melted pump intercom unit. The quality was poor, garbled, but in the background of static, there was a short, damning clip of Gary's voice speaking with calm intent. A forensic linguist matched it to his police interviews, and that clip contradicted his entire version of events. That opened the floodgates. Investigators went back to the charred shell of his car and found irregular burn patterns under the back seat. Chemical analysis confirmed accelerant placement in areas inconsistent with an accidental fire or one initiated by someone else. It had all been staged. With the evidence now undeniable, Gary was arrested again, this time not as a victim or witness, but as the perpetrator. The charge was arson, with a secondary charge of false reporting and obstruction of justice. The trial was short. He pleaded guilty. His sentence was handed down fast. 8 years, with a possibility of parole after 5. No dramatic speeches, no further attempts to pin the blame on us. Just a quiet walk to the courtroom exit, escorted by 2 deputies, his face blank and drained of all that smug certainty he once had. The news broke just as suddenly as the original fire story had. Only this time, the headlines were kinder. Public apologies came from local officials and the police department, along with carefully worded statements about the nature of ongoing investigations and how mistakes happen under pressure. No one outright said they were wrong, but the message was clear. We were no longer suspects. We were finally fully cleared. The company we worked for did not say much publicly, but they reached out to each of us privately. A settlement was offered, a generous one by gas station standards. We each received a lump sum for emotional damages and stress endured, plus 2 months of fully paid leave. They worded it as a goodwill gesture, not an admission of wrongdoing. I did not care. I was just grateful the nightmare was over. Chris decided to use his compensation to take a road trip out west. He always wanted to see the Rockies. Teresa went to stay with her sister in Florida and hinted at not coming back at all. As for me, I returned home, stared at my uniform folded on the back of my chair, and realized I could never put it on again. Every time I smelled gasoline, even from a passing car, something inside me tightened. I had trouble falling asleep. I jumped when I heard sirens. I could not even walk past another gas station without glancing nervously at the pumps. I knew then I was done. I emailed corporate and officially resigned. They said they understood. There was no victory in the end, just survival. We had all been dragged through the eye of a storm for something none of us caused. We were vindicated, but the scars were still there, invisible but sharp. I learned a lot about people in those few weeks, how fast they judge, how loud they speculate, how easily truth gets buried under spectacle. I moved out of Knoxville a month later, started working part-time at a small bookshop in Asheville. No more overnight shifts, no more pumping anything flammable, just quiet aisles, paperbacks, and a window that lets in soft afternoon light. I still think about what happened, especially when a customer recognizes me or brings up the story like it was just another news cycle. But I do not tell it the way the media did. I tell it the way it really happened. Because once, I was just someone trying to do my job. And then, I became the gas station girl.